Thank you for joining us at the Mechanics Institute. I'm Laura Shepard, Director of Events, and we're very pleased to welcome you to our program with Catamaran Literary Reader, one of the most stellar journals of literature and visual arts. This is our second presentation with Catamaran, and we're just delighted to be co-sponsoring this program once again. If you're new to the Mechanics Institute, we were founded in 1854 and we're one of San Francisco's most vital literary and cultural centers here in the heart of the city. We feature our general interest library on the second and third floor, the International Chess Club, which is right down the hallway, and our ongoing literary and cinema programs that are ongoing throughout the year. So please visit our website at milibrary.org. Also, as mentioned before, please join our mailing list and also join a mailing list for Catamaran magazines. I'd like to also introduce Catherine Sigerson, who's going to introduce our guest speakers and our program tonight. Catherine is the founding editor of Catamaran Literary Reader, based in the new Tannery Art Center in Santa Cruz. Catherine, prior to this, has worked with two other literary magazines, including Zoetrope All Story and Zizabo. She has been the editor of Catamaran for the last 11 years, and also for 10 years has run the Catamaran Writers Conference, which happens on Pebble Beach in this end of the summer. And I'm sure if you'd like information on all of the programs that they have, including the Poetry Award and the conference, please go to the website for more information. But first, I'd like to welcome back Catherine Sigerson.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you so much, Laura, and the Mechanics Institute for welcoming Catamaran back for the second time. It's so wonderful. We're based in Santa Cruz, and it's so wonderful for us to be able to come here to San Francisco, especially in this lovely historic building. And it's got such a great history, and it's been a library since 1856, I hear. So it's a pleasure to bring our poets and writers here to read their works. How's that? So this issue is our 42nd issue of Catamaran. We've just completed our 11th year of the magazine. So it's really thrilling to present some of our contributors and hear their work live. We have readers that have come from Santa Cruz and from the Greater Bay Area. So I hope you enjoy our program tonight. I've also brought my managing editor, Elizabeth McKenzie, along. She's going to help me introduce the speakers tonight. She's been with me since the very beginning. So it's really fun. It just keeps evolving and getting better. So, yeah, and we have some people that attended our conference here tonight, and we've been doing that conference for 10 years. So it should be a fun evening. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first reader, which will be John Briscoe. So John Briscoe, many of you may know him. He's a San Francisco poet, author, and lawyer. He has received the Oscar Lewis Award in Western History, first prize in the Top Shelf Book Awards, and other literary distinctions. His law practice for more than 50 years has included representing countries in disputes with other countries in international courts and advising the United Nations in the aftermath of the Gulf War. He is a distinguished fellow at the University of California, Berkeley. So please welcome John Briscoe.
Thank you, Catherine. My maybe not. It's nice to be here, everyone. And Catherine, happy birthday.
Oh, thank
Land's End is an enchanted place here in San Francisco. Those of you from San Francisco know it. It formed the title of Kevin Starr's epic novel 50 years ago. Land's End is also the westernmost point of Cornwall, and throughout the world, there are hundreds of promontories, capes, and points of land that only those who live there know as Land's End. This poem, which appeared a few years ago in Catamaran, is called Land's End. Near Cape Mendocino, near sunset, cows look. Somewhere. There, the far pasture, near where oaks with drones and pines appear. Raise the ridge and browse down its slope. This 15 in all, perhaps. 5 adults, brown, spotted, white, with small dun horns. Glowing again, in no discernible chorus, they shamble off with some of the young to someplace, perhaps to sleep. The low salmon sun slips beneath the sea. Indigo washes all the sea's phosphorescence and all the most western sky. 5 cows stay back, playing late this day's end, with the purposeless energy of bounding fawns, gambling and plucking fish, right in the paths of 3 oncoming, heedless spheres, and a cow returning, black spotted now in the dust, equally with no reason. About 15, 16 years ago, I can shout easier than I can talk into the microphone. About 15 or 16 years ago, Seamus Heaney gave a poetry reading here in San Francisco, and then he and his wife Mary, who had traveled with them, went to a very late dinner, at the conclusion of which Seamus, who won the Nobel Prize in 1994, said to his wife Mary, would you please come with me to a short poetry reading tomorrow evening? And Mary Heaney said, Seamus, there is no such thing as a short poetry reading. Mindful of that, I'm going to switch to an essay that I wrote for Catamaran. That appeared about 4 years ago. And read you the whole thing. Read you the whole thing. I want to quote from it. The essay appeared under the title, The Ancient and Honorable Art of Light Verse. The editorial staff changed the original title, which was Death Watch, The Ancient and Honorable Art of Light Verse. You see, from the beginning of our Western literary canon, which is what, everybody? Iliad. Boom. That's it, that's the beginning. Right? Obviously, there was literature before, but we don't know what it was. It hasn't survived. Light verse, humorous verse, has figured heavily in our poetry, in our literature. Book 1 of Iliad. If you don't remember, read it again. In book 1, this is right at the beginning of Western literature, okay? There is a scene where Zeus and Hera have a row. And as you read any translation you want, from chapter 2 to brand new and out, think of Ralph and Alice Crampton in The Honeymoon. It's the same scene, the same comedy. This bombastic man is gotten the better of by his wife. Wit and wild and everything else, just as Ralph and Alice would do it. Think further. Aristophanes centuries later in Greece, a great comic playwright, Lysistrata. This is poetry. This is a poem that is acted out on the stage. Lysistrata. This is in the middle of the Peloponnesian War, and the plot device is the women have figured out how to end the war. How? By going on sex strike. And they do. And it is comic beyond all belief. Moving out to English, Chaucer. Some of the most comic moments in literature, Margaret Chaucer, Shakespeare, Jabberwocky in the 19th century. It's in the Oxford Book of English Verse. It's nonsense. Was really as slightly toast and gyre and gimple in the way all men seem to do. It's like silly verse. Here in San Francisco has always been a hotbed of light verse. The most famous light verse poem, and as a matter of fact, the most famous poem in America for a good period of time was composed here in 1896 by Gillette Burgess, The Purple Cow. It was estimated that 50% of all Americans knew it by heart, and 75% of all Americans knew of it, had read it. 1925, the New Yorker was founded as a sophisticated humor magazine. And along its staff soon were three of the greatest practitioners of light verse ever. Two great women poets, Phyllis McGinley and Dorothy Parker, and the great Ogden Nash. Today, any one of you submit some light verse to the New Yorker or the Atlantic or Harper's, or I dare say, Catamaran, the Referee Reader, and you're about to be consigned to the junk file for all eternity. When's the last time you read in a serious literary magazine a piece of light verse? And so my question to you is, why is that? Thank you.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Elizabeth, and as Catherine mentioned, I've been with the magazine, yeah. And it's been one of the highlights of my literary life. And I'm very pleased to be presenting the magazine's work with Catherine tonight for the mechanics associated with a great reader. Our next reader is Dion O'Reilly. Dion O'Reilly's debut collection, Ghost Dogs, was runner-up for the Catamaran Prize and shortlisted for several awards, including the Aris Hoffer Award. Her second book, Sadness of the Apex Predator, will be published by the University of Wisconsin's Literature Trust in 2024. And it has an amazing cover by Veronica Bosch. Her work appears in the Missouri Review, the Ohio Review, the Sun, Rattle, Narrative, and the Slowdown. She facilitates private workshops, hosts a podcast at the Hive Poetry Collective, and is a reader for Catamaran. She splits her time between a ranch in the Santa Cruz Mountains and a residence in Bellingham, Washington. Please welcome Dion O'Reilly.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. Do I sound okay?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Catherine. What's up? It's always a pleasure to meet Catamaran. I like to say I think it's the most beautiful literary journal, maybe in the world. It might be. Okay, so this first poem I'm going to read is the one that's in the magazine. Uprising. Going to have a graph. The deluge came from the skies and the sea. It was in the Washington Post last winter, January 2023. For decades, I had waited for this as I walked the cliffs, imagined the Pacific scooting under sea walls, $5 million mansions gasping as they fell. After a flood, for a while, something changes. You see what happens when the neglected surge. They have a voice, what they call a vengeance. After years of sun, colonial in their oppression, a king tide, broken dams, what was described as a sky river, size of the Mississippi, dumped down on houses, a mud brown tide lifted over a meter bank, high as a man, it rode into town on the carpet of silt. You guys remember the rain last year? Pretty memorable. This one is about my dear friend Susie. She was like a sister when I was growing up, and I just can't seem to stop writing about her. Oh, Black Water. Susie, I want to tell you how frequently I pass the apartment behind the supermarket where we street danced to the Doobie Brothers. Light shifting as the fog lifted, front yard roses iridescent in a salt gray seaside morning. You died, what, 10 years ago? Not at once, though the pills took you quickly. It began, I think, when we were children. Without knowing why, we wanted out of that rural beauty, the narrow valley and gleaming stream, summers spent diving off crumbling cliffs, as if nearness to death was the closest we came to leaving. Your stepdad's beery fingers, my mother who loved to touch the sweaty chests of her daughter's teenage lovers. Nowadays, everything is a different kind of dangerous. Rain stays away. June mist sucks away too soon. Sunlight breaks through before it should. What I want to say, Susie, is a moment gone 50 years is just a moment. But you're still here, unfleshed, in brightness, elfin, jittery, wan. Our arms looped as we turn tight circles, round and round, your eyes locked on mine. You there, Susie? This one is about my adopted home, Bellingham, when I first moved there way back in the 70s. In Bellingham, I lived in a shanty on a ridge. One window facing the Salish Sea, the other a stand of cedars, their scaly leaves a ceaseless ticking on my roof. I charmed a man to let me live there. He fished in Alaska, June to September, placed the keys in my hand like a velvet bag of diamonds. He was in love with me, but I didn't want him. He hustled mushrooms, hung drywall, never learned to read or write, but could fix anything. Stooped over the motor of his Model A, his bare back muscled and pelted, fingers light on the implements, murmuring rich to the right, lean to the left. At the time, I was in love with a Seattle man who designed high-rise towers made of glass. I had moved north to escape the sight of him with his red-haired girlfriend, her sun-flecked skin and slender arms. Most nights, I hiked home slow up Seahome Hill, my body hot inside the steamy wool, the double-coated nylon of my coat. When I got home, the cabin was cold, quiet. I think the fire, fall asleep, thinking about those two men. One who dropped me off for good on a dark street, the other wordless, his eyes stitched with light. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. Our next reader is Jeff Ewing. Jeff Ewing is the author of the poetry collection Wind Apples and the short story collection The Middle Ground. His poetry, fiction, and essays have appeared in Crazy Horse, Southwest Review, Zizzyville, Willow Springs, Subtropic, Bootney Reader, Cherry Tree, and like 3 or 4 times in Catamaran before this. And he lives in Sacramento, so he came all the way from Sacramento to be here. Please welcome Jeff Ewing.
Thanks, Catherine. And thanks to Catherine and Elizabeth for, you guys have been very good to me for the last 11 years. Appreciate it. And the first one I'm going to read is from this issue of Catamaran. Unfortunately, it's no purple cow, but it's part of a series of books that wrote, inspired by a grandfather of a Norwegian friend of mine who lived in a small town in Norway during the Nazi occupation.
Could you raise your microphone
Oh, yeah.
or use the handheld?
Yeah,
They're live.
okay, is that better?
Oh,
This is a well-made door. He fashioned its soft whisper of wood against wood, the hush of breath across the threshold himself as the world outside was pushed a step back. Cut and fitted in the first days of their marriage when care was taken with such things. Wondering now, is it wrong to love a closing door? It was pride, he knows, that took its silence for safety. It worked every squeak from the latch. How he wishes now it had slammed like thunder. Sometimes at night there was scratching, frantic claws at the onset of winter. You'd see the marks in the morning and tell the girls it was fairies calling them out into the storm. They would go, he knew, if given a chance. So he buried the bulls' curled bodies a good ways off from the trees, and still they followed. Out came in, and in grew inner, thick with the smoke of swallowed words, while the bones under the beach offered up mushrooms for some fox's dinner. So much then for a door, its brass knob tarnished, hinges frozen on their pins. Even the wind knew better than the company. And then the next is from my book, Wind Apples. And this is a little ode to a drive-in theater in Sacramento that's long gone. It's called Adios Westerner Drive-In. So much for dust washing against banks of fenders, asphalt cresting and rutted breakers rimed with grass. Maybe we're done waiting with necks and soles craned while Hans Zimmer and Lionel Newman play us for fools, and the ghosts of our shadows troop in elastic parade from the snack bar, past vast mouths poised for kissing. How could we not be dwarfed by those ardent faces, lips fat and red as pepper slices, eyes like saucepans? Give me a break, the Joker calls over the crackling banner, as gargantuan glands promise undying love. We know better, he's trying to say, but more to the point, we don't. The jackrabbits study us, thumping in frustration. What a spectacle we must be, falling ass backwards through our lives with the volume cranked. Fumbling with sure hands unknot their puzzles above us, and our exit music settles like dew on the star thistle and milkweed. And this is this one I wrote not long before my daughter was born. It's called A Wager. Below an outcrop of black lava that bent the tracks made the train wheels shriek. Between the loose spree of the embankment and the soft sponging grass of the riverbank, I made a wager with myself. If I caught one that morning, brown, rainbow, cutthroat, it didn't matter which. If I could land just one fish, the baby would be healthy. It was a little game I played with myself, nothing more. If this, then that, if that, then this. An illusion of control where there was no control, only chance, a turning over of cards. The cliffs on the far side leaned close, breathing haze onto the water. The deep lies along the cut bank were still in shade. I stepped in, cast up toward an eddy, folding the current along hidden rifts, and waited. Knowing the strike would come, but caught all the same, the pale belly flashed, and the leader, then the line, went taut and dove toward the memory of deeper water. I set the hook lightly, out of caution too lightly, as the trout turned downstream, counting on the current to draw it away from the monofilament tangent, the beaded treachery of air. Every muscle straining against the pull, its will compressed into one thought, it thrashed its head and threw the hook. When the line went slack, I didn't reel in right away. I stood where I was and let the current, bitter cold with last year's snow, push against my legs. I looked into the riffles where the light disappeared among polished stones and waited for the end. For fate in the guise of a bent-nosed mobster to wade upstream from Reno and collect. To force me to go on, to live without my finger tightly clenched just once by a hand too delicate for alignment. I thought I had lost everything. I thought I would be held to my wager. Then I began to argue. If the world of the wager were true, if that was my daughter silvering away downstream, then the twisted head that freed the hook was her choice, no one else's. And I thought I'd better get used to that. Because one day, a day like this, a day full up with sun and loss, with clear water and hubris, she'll turn her head, smile and go, and won't have the time, even if she wanted, to watch the brush go pale with heat, to feel the weightless line draw S's on the surface film, to know the house has forgiven all debts, to join me on the long walk home. This last one is As the Crow Flies. From sufficient height, we make a kind of sense. The designs we scratch in the dirt and dry grass appear reasonable if desperate. The white stones like rows of teeth, roads like knotted shoelaces. We move and a wave presses the crow's belly. Two fences, one stone, one woven slats, rise and fall across sheet-backed swells under clouds that threaten more than they can deliver. Rain falls where it will, and where it won't, we root ourselves deeper, douse blind to hard pan. What madness can rival the sight of us scrabbling over ridge and moraine? The crow feathers his wings, hovers a black lie above the country bent under its load. Tin feathers whir like cards and spokes. The shrill cry, gravel on tin, rattles down slope. Small wonder his straight flight from A to B confounds us. We hunch over cooling coffees, arrange our chairs on listing decks, while all the tumbling glaciers carry on, without us at last having had our say. An error born in error. The light's gone out, my headless chickens. We move such delicate dead by sheer nerve memory. Out on the bluffs brimming with lupin, the blue on black wing clapping overhead. Our fall general, not to wake the Pacific from its dream of us.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker is Stephen B. Gutierrez. He's the author of 3 collections of short stories and essays, and the winner of an American Book Award. Okay. He has published extensively in journals and anthologies, including Catamaran, and Chicago Quarterly Review, and most recently, Hunger Mountain Review, the North American Review, and Cimarron Review. 2 of his essays have received notable listings in Best American Essays. Originally from a small working-class city in southeast Los Angeles County, City of Commerce, he taught for many years at Cal State East Bay and continues to live in the East Bay since retiring. I think you have some news about a new book too, I think, maybe. Please welcome Steve Gutierrez.
don't know whether to try to read with this in my hand or do this. I've never been good at a handheld mic.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Lisa. Catherine, for having me. I'm not in the current issue, fall 21 issue. I'll read from the essay in it, it's called The Broken One. I'll read the last part of it, last third or something like that. I think all the themes will be apparent, but setting church, Catholic church. There you go. You guys need that, you know. This is kind of doctrine. Let's see, I'll just grab that. I am ready for unhappiness. I am gloomy by disposition and wary by experience. The worst is yet to come. I live my life on that premise. It clouds my outlook. To put it blankly, I know that I will face another trial in time. I will be tested before I set carefully into my grave, I hope, lowered with a modicum of respectful attention, so I don't tip out of the coffin and make an ass of myself on the ground, my face buried in the dirt. Look at Steve, is he dead or alive or in between? Both, as I've always been. A moment before calling back in. Get it right this time, boys, I'm tired. My part isn't over. Comedy is fun, but I expect black clouds and hurricanes. I attend Mass not as insurance against calamity up the road, but as proof positive to be presented in whatever form I can to God's lawful clerks in this trial of mine coming up with a simple claim. Whatever disaster befalls me in the future that is far or near, whatever life has in store for me in the misery department, or has already brewed up and visited upon my head to bring me there, to the seat of God's judgment, I stayed faithful. I never fell back into old habits and plotted and planned against it in my favor, expecting to come out on top, like I ruled it. I kept my promise. Did I not? I kept coming back and coming back just to show I was not above it. God, religion, and all the rest, the official spiritual bag, not the mindful route, not the spirituality mode, not religious but spiritual. Not anything but a God hunt along additional lines to grasp the treasure, the peace that passes all understanding and calms you down for life. It sounded like a good deal, but it wasn't that fantasy that brought me back. It was more prosaic. I was at Mass then, and I'm there today, gladly, every week, separating the rabid communicants of the altar. I'm picking up essays and trying to keep a straight face. I'm drifting, I'm attentive, fighting my own interior battle. I'm there. I participate, shaking hands and standing up and kneeling down and singing. Barely, I'm terrible. I'm never bored, never too antsy that I want to scream like in high school. What time is the Lakers game? I gave my word. You have to trust me, guaranteed my presence. But I'm good for it. I'm soft on details. I only remember my commitment entered into shortly after I parked my car and burst into the church in a state of disrepair and observed for a nerve-curdling moment the Mass in progress, people in sync. Divest me of me, O Lord. I'm saluted for no earthly reason, but before performing a sloppy sign of the cross and dropping to my knees right there on the floor. Get up now, get up. I slowly arose and crept solemnly to an empty seat at the end of the pew, as if reserved for me, the broken one. That's one way to end an essay. But another way is more truthfully. I made a stricter vow. I never called myself better than it. I never forgot my place in the bargain and got big-headed again and crowned myself the victor over it, life. God, fate, whatever name suits it, perforce. No, never ever in my mind or in my heart fancied myself the rival of it, the worthy foe, the better man, because I was so full of myself and I'm chasing because I was so full of myself and chasing down a theme, my own disillusion, I can continue in this vein. I can enumerate instances of my vanity. It's necessary. It's essential to capturing the rock in me and to gauging the depth of my spiritual degradation that only a full-blown crisis can cure, the nature of which has remained secret and will stay closed. I'm open. I'm resilient. I'm manhandled in the future, surely, but even turned upside down on my head in God's rough, callous hand, I can say I never reverted to an old version of me. I never underestimated life. I never played games with it. Oh no, baby, not you. I never mocked it and taunted it, and can you believe the fool I was? Stuck my tongue out at it in a mirror. Big bad life. I never sat back and got drunk, not too much anyway, as company is rare and fraught, and told stale jokes where I emerged the sly hero, like the brute I overpowered with wit, thump, thump, and never repeated my asinine act and stared into space and pronounced myself one and the same with it. The stars, the sun, all in me, like Whitman, and now all the philosophers and scientists are saying. We're made of the same dust as stars. Big deal. Life is real, a terror. But even before I retired with full ceremony and acclaim, with emeritus privileges, I never inflated myself in a classroom hubris to make a point, but in fact, serious inside, say, I am bigger than life. No, never. Not in any context, not even kidding after a rough day. Fuck life, it's on the ropes. I never crossed it, not since my knees buckled in mass amid a crowd of strangers. Oh my, and I swayed on my feet. Help me. What's he saying? Help him. No, I'm fine. I'm sticking to my story. That's all I got. My words, my art, my truths, my attempt to pull it all together. God on top of me, God below me, God in me. I can't stop. I'm Mr. Narrative and Locomotion, motivated by profound emptiness that I haven't even brought up, an overwhelming sadness, and an active heart that is a big burning engine causing me to clasp the damn thing right now, pull it out maybe, and hold it up to the sun, like an old asset, yes? What am I talking about? Defending myself. I'm forever in need of justification to even live. No wonder then I call out life. But I'm lost. Bullshit. I'm saying I never surrendered. I never wrote an essay in my life. It's all about the holiness of the imagination and what it can teach us. It's also real and unreal, isn't it? Life. I'm on it. I'm a fiction writer, a short story dude. I'm gathering material. I'm breathing hard for just a minute, breathing in and out of my nostrils with great deliberation and getting a hold of myself, certainly in this church. Let me just sit here with you, okay? I just want to bow my head and pray.
Thank you, Steve. Our next reader is Yaccaria Salvatierra. Yaccaria Salvatierra's poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Poetry Magazine, The Nation, Huisashi, and Rattle, among others. Her collection, Sons of Salt, is forthcoming with the BOA editions in 2024. She's an organizer for the San Francisco International Flor y Canto Literary Festival and a contributing editor for Huisashi. She lives in Oakland, California, where she's a dedicated educator. Please welcome Yaccaria Salvatierra.
Seeing everybody's faces. I drove back home to work, I'm an educator, and it was pretty hectic. I'll read the poem that was published with Catamaran. It is from the, oh, sorry? It is from the book that is coming out next year. A woman dreaming of a volcano. I can see a volcano several miles away and almost feel its dirt on the soles of my bare feet, or its breeze lifting the lightest parts of me, my draping dress of soft red oil, the dark wavy tresses of my hair, and the unhealed wound so small, so unseen. What would happen if one of the rooms in my chest behind a bone fence erupts? Would I be able to escape unscathed to another room without a wound, another volcano? So I'll read the first poem from the book. It's kind of like this exploration of of pain when something happens to one of our children, and then looking to where to turn to. And for me, it was my dreams and the questioning of who. When there is nothing else, like what is God? Prologue. Brittling wood of my ribs, where are you stranded? I have been driving along Highway 1, winding roads, tall cypress trees off the coast of California. Because somewhere along the coast, between Point Reyes and farmlands riddled with cows and lavender-colored lupine, I was told there was a shipwreck on a beach or marsh. Wood eaten by wind, expanding with water, wood rot, dried by sun and sea salt. Hijo mío. The story goes like this. When the ocean imagined you, it stretched a mighty wave, reached into my chest, and broke the strongest rib above my heart to build you. I am wounded above the heart, left on a shore, unprotected. Seen as I was, sparrows filled the emptiness of me with a dome-like clay nest and laid their eggs. I watched as the shells cracked from the inside, how each chick took flight, none resembling you. Longing for your song, I called to the ocean to send a wave upon me, sea salt on a wound, the sea sounding in my ear. I'm also translating a book of poetry by Peruvian poet Ana Varela Tufur. She's from the Amazon of Peru. And the way that she writes is there's a lot of spirit, right, in those bodies as in ours. And I just feel super honored to work with her and translate her work. This poem recently was published. It's called Wooden Bodies. By the banks or the center of a river, the wooden bodies travel towards the sawmills. From a port, I contemplate their drenched backs. Have you seen submerged logs passing through the city? They look like napping alligators or broken up islands driven by ferrymen. When these pieces of wood arrive to their destination, we are reminded of their conflict of use. The men cut down trees and fabricate lies about what we need. Municipal seats, nightstands, altars, picture frames, dressers, tourist souvenirs. They were more than sawed pieces, these exploited bodies. They were birth havens, these thousands of years old chihuahuacos, now laminated and organized. They're the last links of an extractive chain. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is John Stiny. John Stiny studied English literature at the University of California, Davis. He's a writer and woodworker and an owl box maker. He works in marketing and heads outdoors as often as possible. He lives with his wife, a third grade teacher in Petaluma. His work has appeared in the Los Angeles Review, Grit Magazine, Sacramento Magazine, and previously in Catamaran in 2016. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. Nice to be here. This is my second appearance in Catamaran, and each time I tell people about it or about Catamaran, I have to explain that no, it's not a phony article that I've written. I wrote this piece. It's titled "Atom Bombs Don't Beg Forgiveness." I wrote this last summer, 2022, and I had heard that a film was being conceived, but it's been interesting to see how topical it's become in recent months. But this piece is about my grandfather. My grandfather harnessed the power of the sun in the forsaken New Mexican desert. His quiet blue eyes witnessed the zenith of this earth, the most powerful tool wise man has yet built. The meridian of destruction, it warmed his whiskered cheeks. In his aged years, his fingers and toes curled like a velociraptor's. Rheumatism of his digits, visible arthritis of the utmost severity from exposure to the bomb. Each test, atoms crashed into his cells shortly after they crashed into each other. Surgery straightened his toes, but he opted against uncoiling his fingers. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were good and all, but we Americans can break down the dagger of the sun with much more proficiency than those two triumphs. And with a ravenous American appetite, why stop at two? Those were merely warm-ups that later we were poked hard enough by the cold Soviet sickle, ever brimming with nationalism and arrogance as we hid under our pitiful desks. Howard Buffington, my grandfather, came to Los Alamos to engineer electronic components in the years post-Japanese surrender as fellow engineers and scientists and Nazi converts worked to tame the splitting of atoms. This fission-powered weaponry needed study and control if it was to be added to our permanent American arsenal. The atomic laboratory was dubbed Site Y, or the Hill, by semi-knowing locals. Lab residents lived among each other like a peculiar summer camp for academics with the Army as their camp counselor. Many hadn't the faintest clue of their neighbor's rank or status or pecking order. A colonel or a physicist or a janitor might be standing in line at the commissary, unclear which of them occupied a corner office or held a wet lawn. They may have gone home and swaddled newborns with the same hands that swaddled plutonium spheres hours before. The atom was split, the thunderous water surged, and the inaugural detonation raced around the atoll until it rose and mushroomed and dissipated into the wide-eyed atmosphere. Each test gadget bigger than the previous, designed differently, dropped at different altitudes, set off near the seafloor. Retired frigates were anchored around the lagoon so their damage could be assessed from afar. Howard told us, always with a smirk and a twinkle, that he once found himself eating a sandwich on a makeshift oval bench of sorts. He looked down and realized he was sitting on a bomb gadget in some state of assembly. 20,000 tons of dynamite below him while he shoved a bologna sandwich before going back to his post. Most certainly it did, but we like the image of it all. In all, the atoll was nuked 23 times. They blew up the land and the sea, the birds and the fish, invertebrates and backbone creatures alike. How many albatross and corals and coconut crabs were unwittingly decimated or entered no man's land just as another rupture was triggered. 3/4 of a century later, the atoll itself is mostly uninhabitable. A scant few Bikinians now live there as caretakers, but the humanity was blasted off the island alongside its fauna and vigor 7 decades ago. The atoll and its islands were inhabited by creatures of all design for thousands of years. The bomb destroyed that all in seconds.
Staggering destruction aside, what a feeling it must have been to have contributed and borne witness to the most advanced project man has undertaken, to have changed the face of the earth and human relations in perpetuity. What a distinguished elation, a sense of realization and conquest and resolution. Though it was seldom mentioned, my grandfather tacitly revered the deed they had consummated those many years before. The task had been given and completed, and was far greater than him or any man whose signature was on that bomb. Something so astounding in its splendor and depravity, its fingerprint on its creation, that it was worth its adulation. Nowadays, the summer months bring with them a blushing reminder of the atoll. In the Greek Isles or the south of France or the big island of Hawaii, the remnants of the atoll are present in the 2 pieces of pastel-colored nylon that adorn each maiden. If bikini means place of coconuts, similar can be said for the bikini, the namesake sunny garment that indeed takes its name from the atoll. My grandfather lit into me once for depleting the hot water in the shower during our once a summer sojourn to my grandparents' Mount Shasta home. He and his cadre had enough to wash the dust from the hair in that desert. I had squandered the hot water that night without a thought in my head. My hair still damp, the gruff scolding he gave startled me. As the years came and went and tripped over each other, his time in the bomb quietly faded to memory. What could these men of science possibly do with the remainder of their lives after they had devised a false sun? My grandfather became the chief engineer of a modest cable company he co-founded in the hardscrabble mountains of Northern California. He stowed a 50s era Ford Thunderbird in his garage, baby blue, a chic reminder of the era of his heyday in that mesquite desert. I never saw him drive it. Had each man who had contributed to the gadget become dead? When Howard's bewhiskered face felt the warmth of the bomb, did that distinguish him a destroyer of worlds? Today, an obelisk of lava rock marks the spot of the Trinity test in New Mexico. A Picayune plaque in it states the obvious. 2 days before the Trinity test, Oppenheimer again quoted from the Bhagavad Gita. In battle, in the forest, at the precipice, in the mountains, on the dark, great sea, in the midst of javelins and arrows, in sleep, in confusion, in the depths of shame, the good deeds a man has done before defend him. My grandfather was a good man and did good deeds and harnessed the power of the sun. Just as it is the instinct of the owl to catch the vole or the bear to winter hibernate, it is the instinct of man to split the atom. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. That was from our summer issue that came out at the same time as the movie did. Very interesting. Well, we have one more reader tonight. I also want to mention this slideshow. Thank you, Sandy, for putting this together. It's art from this issue of the magazine, and I like to curate visual art that goes with the narrative of the essays and poems and stories, because the visual artists are doing the same thing, only they have a different medium they're using. So it's really nice to see the art being shown with the readings. And we have one more reader, Dan Haifley. He's really well known in Santa Cruz because he was responsible for preserving the Monterey Bay and making the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. And so he's our hero in Santa Cruz. So it's nice to bring him here and have him read a bit of his personal essay about doing that. Let me just read his more elaborate bio. Dan Haifley was the executive director of O'Neill Speed Odyssey, a free ocean-going science and environmental program for low-income elementary school students. He serves on the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council and is a board member and secretary for the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. And from 2008 till 2019, he published an ocean column in the Santa Cruz Sentinel. Please welcome Dan Haifley.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Catherine, for having me in this beautiful magazine. This magazine really deserves your support. It's incredible work that's done. So the name of this essay is Protecting the Ocean with an Old Ford Pinto and a Kitchen Table Slideshow, Creating the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. Quote, it is advisable to look from the tide pool to the stars and then back to the tide pool again. John Steinbeck from the log from the sea of Cortez. We stepped off the helicopter that had flown west from Santa Maria over Vandenberg Air Force Base and the ocean and touched down on the windy deck of this offshore oil platform. We were immediately instructed that in case of explosion or fire, we were to scramble into the brightly colored escape pod right in front of us that would send us off this steel structure and into the safety of the choppy seas below. It was 1991, and Santa Cruz City Council members Scott Kennedy and Don Lane had accepted an invitation to tour Platform Irene, the northernmost energy production facility in federal waters off California, and they brought me along. I was the first and only staff person at Save Our Shores, a Santa Cruz-based organization that had been hired by the city 5 years earlier to undertake a campaign with local governments in their fight against offshore oil development for California's northern and central coast. I still have an electronic version of a photo that Scott took with his Polaroid camera of Don and me, an oil company supplied foul weather gear, the sea behind us, thinly veiled smiles of mischief on our faces. Half a century earlier, John Steinbeck's sidekick, Ed Ricketts, who operated a marine lab next to today's Monterey Bay Aquarium, spent time doing research in tide pools along the shores of Monterey and the Sears Road, which resulted in the book To Be Seen Between Pacific Tides, while his life provided rich material for Steinbeck's own work. The two of them piloted a chartered vessel, the Western Flyer, to the Sea of Cortez, which Steinbeck would later use as a basis for his book, The Log from the Sea of Cortez. Ricketts' contemporary, Pacific Grove Mayor and neurobiologist Julia Platt, convinced the state legislature to establish California's first marine reserve in 1931 just off its shore. Her effort was an early forerunner of Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which today covers 6,094 square miles off of 1/4 of California's coast. The 1,100 miles of California's beautifully complex coastline feature rock outcroppings, sandy beaches, tide pools with sea stars, anemones, and crabs, and beautifully productive wetlands that fight climate change, buffer ocean-generated erosion, and serve as wildlife nurseries. The coast north of Santa Barbara County is also defined by what we don't see on the horizon, offshore oil platforms, though just over 3 decades ago, ocean waters between Santa Cruz and San Francisco and off San Luis Obispo County were high-value targets for the oil industry. But coastal Southern California, near my boyhood home, hosted drilling for decades, beginning with wells off the beaches in the 1890s. I thought the platforms in the Santa Barbara Channel and off Huntington Beach and Long Beach were as much a part of the landscape as the trees and wildlife I encountered on my hiking trips with my father and his Boy Scout troop in the San Bernardino Mountains. The outdoors seemed a great escape for us, but they were not immune from the flaws of technology and the tragedy of human error. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our reading. Please give it up one more time for John Briscoe. Dion O'Reilly, and Ewing, Stephen Gutierrez, Yaccaria Salvatierra.
And everyone who read tonight, such inspired poetry, essay, a little history, San Francisco and California history, and also thank you to Catherine Sigerson, editor and publisher for Catamaran Literary Reader. Just beautiful literature and the graphics and art that comes with all of the collection. So we have our Catamaran for sale now, if you'd like to pick up a copy, and we welcome you back for next time.
Oh, thank you.